As I'm sure you've heard by now, Republican lawmakers have outlawed pizza in voting lines in Georgia. And while I, as an American of Italian descent, am clearly up in arms anytime pizza is banned anywhere, I am also upset over the implications of this and other bills being introduced in an effort to curtail voting accessibility right now in 43 states across the nation. Perhaps since I wrote this, it has gone up to more states. Not sure. Greg Palast is here to join us to talk about what's going on. Well, first of all, I'm very happy to have you here and all the work. Thanks for all the work that you've been doing over the course of, well, decades, but also just specifically these last few months. Some of your work was instrumental in the Georgia Senate wins, which have really had a big impact already. So thank you for that.
I'd say you're welcome, except my job as a journalist isn't to elect anyone. That was kind of a collateral damage, or maybe collateral serendipity, depending on who you like. But for 8 years, I've been investigating vote suppression in Georgia. And in the last year, I added my foundation. We also actually took on and sued the state of Georgia in federal court and won cases which opened up their files and brought back a lot of voters. So I've been working all year, but this is the last of a series of 8 years in which I've been working. And yes, I broke the story that one of the things that Georgia did was outlaw handing pizza or bottled water to people standing in line to vote. And I should say that it's not just a violation or prohibited. It's a felony crime. Pizza has been made a felony crime in Georgia. I kid you not. And by the way, the guy that instituted that rule is a guy named Brad Raffensperger that Biden just said is a hero who saved democracy. Well, not if you're a Georgian. According to the NAACP, that guy, the Republican Secretary of State, the guy that I sued for trying to remove Black and Asian voters from the voter rolls, and that's something I want to get to, the Asian voters in Georgia, is the NAACP calls him the vote suppressor in chief. Mm-hmm. So we have a long history in many states, but especially in Georgia. And the reason I've been working in Georgia, many people know Greg Palast from The Guardian and other stories. I did this. I first got into this 20 years ago back in Florida when I discovered that Catherine Harris, Jeb Bush had removed tens of thousands of Black people from the voter rolls, calling them felons. Everyone was guilty of no crime except voting while Black. That's what elected George Bush as president. So we have George Bush elected president by, manipulating the voter rolls. And then we had the same thing juiced up in Georgia. And interestingly, and this is very important given the events this week and the killings in Georgia, I've been on this story of the response to the rising Asian American community and the Asian American vote, which is really important, which they've done everything in the world to suppress. Because it was when if you want to thank someone for electing Warnock or Ossoff, if that's your preference, my job is just to allow people to let the voters choose their Senate. Hey, how about that for a novel idea? But it was the Asian American vote that put Ossoff, Warnock, and Biden and gave them Georgia. And this is one thing which is completely shaken Georgia, which is now, by the way, as of this year, a minority majority state. That is, there are more non-white people than white people in Georgia. And a lot of white people in Georgia aren't crazy about that.
Well, that's too bad. They're going to have to figure it out.
Well, and by the way, they're called, when I say white people, that's just a shade. They're called Republicans. And now when I say Republicans, understand my investigations often attack and go after Democratic vote manipulators. But right now, when you talk about removing voters of color, they're removing the color is blue, whether they're Black, Hispanic, or Asian American. And I first did a story, Julianna, back in 8 years ago for Al Jazeera on the attack on two groups of voters, the Black voters. I put the Stacey Abrams and Reverend Warnock for the first time on national television and then on Democracy Now! And but then I did a story about the vicious attack on Asian American voters. But obviously there's a kind of an anti-Italian prejudice because they're really going after pizza. Yeah. Just so you know, and if you go to gregpalast.com, you can actually see a film. I caught these felons from a gang known as the Papa John's Pizza Pusher Gang. I kid you not. There was, okay, so you had at the polling stations, you had these guys in Papa John's smocks handing out, well, they were actually handing out calzones, but that's also a felony offense.
An offense. Okay, we're going to have to hand out Pazul from now on.
Yeah, right. So it's pocket pizza for those who don't know.
Who does not know in this day and age what a calzone? Okay, go ahead.
Well, well, it's true because given Papa John's, right? So Papa John's was out there committing this crime. Now we laugh about it, but let me tell you, here's the problem. In Georgia, as in other states, and Georgia's important because they take my experience in the past 8 years is like, why would this guy from actually is living in London to start with. Why would this guy fly from London to Georgia? Because they take it appears that every time the GOP has a new racial vote suppression tactic, they take it for a test drive in Georgia because that's their key state. They saw Georgia switching. So what happened was they make the lines incredibly long. How do they do that? So in the new law that was just passed in Georgia, they've massively cut the number of polling stations. They've eliminated over half the public voted by mail or early. They eliminated virtually all mail-in balloting by saying you're going to need like a doctor's note, like you're 7 years old and you have to have a doctor's note to go back to school. So you need a doctor's note to get an absentee ballot. Or they've also eliminated drop boxes. It was simple. You know, you'd get the ballot in the mail, and then you drop it off in a secure box, which had, by the way, video recording of anyone getting near the box, all that stuff. And that's the beginning. And then they cut the number of voting hours, including eliminating voting on Sundays, which they know is the preferred date. It's called Souls to the Polls Days in the African-American community because people go after church. And there's a reason. It's not just a lot of people can't get off on Tuesday, especially in low-income communities where they are in what we now call essential jobs, meaning minimum wage.
And also, wouldn't it be important to go as a group these days once people are being threatened at the polls by? Well,
threatened, and also there's something simple. Because I've been to many Souls to the Polls caravans, is that a lot of, especially elderly people, don't have cars in these communities, and these are long distances. And like when I was in Cobb County, where I took pictures of these illegal pizza pushers from Papa John's, they had only 11 polling stations in this 2020 Senate race. Only 11 polling stations in Cobb County, which is a chunk of Atlanta, 500,000 voters, 11 stations. And then that was in the general when Biden won by 12,000 votes. Well, that 12,000 votes came from Cobb County, which is Newt Gingrich's district. So the GOP was so upset that they closed 6 of the 11 polling stations for early voting. 6 of the 11 polling stations were closed, every single one in a Black community. We had pictures. We interviewed voters who had to drive 20 miles to get to the polling station. Now, here's the thing. So now you've eliminated Dropbox, you've eliminated mail-in balloting, you've eliminated polling stations, you eliminated Sunday voting. So what's happening? The lines in the remaining stations are getting longer and longer and longer. And so now you're waiting 3, 4, 5 hours. I was there.
Unbelievable.
There are 4-hour waits. And so what they do is they say, no one can hand you a bottle of water. Forget the pizza. You can't even get a bottle of water handed to you. That's a crime. You go to jail, they will handcuff you, put you on the ground with their knee on your neck.
How can they do this?
Huh? What?
I mean, how can they do this?
How can they? How can they?
Yeah. Are there no laws?
When was the last time you were in Rome, Georgia?
Well, it's been a while. I was down there recently in Brunswick, which still had a statue of a. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's happening is that, and this is happening all over the country, but Georgia's like the poster child for this kind of nonsense, which Biden said that, by the way, the people that did this are the people that this past week Biden congratulated for saving democracy. I'm sorry, we saved the democracy from these guys. Okay.
Why did we do that? Just out of curiosity?
Why do we save democracy?
Well, I know why we did that, but why did Biden think?
Well, remember this guy, Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia. He's the guy that released the tape of Donald Trump muscling him probably committing a federal crime of interference in voting.
Right.
And by the way, that's the crime that Raffensperger wants to charge Papa John's with, is interference in voting. He didn't charge Trump. He's charging Papa John's, and he's opening an investigation of Stacey Abrams and Reverend Warnock on grounds that they're interfering in the election by discouraging people by saying, believe it or not, there's vote suppression in Georgia.
Greg, how on earth is there still local Republican control when in Georgia, obviously, because I don't think the Democrats are voting to take pizza out. I'm just an assumption here. How is it still that Georgia is locally controlled by Republicans who are doing this? Well,
they won't be. And that's why there's in such a panic, and they'll stop you from having water in a 4-hour line. And understand, I also was in line with Christine Jordan, Martin Luther King's cousin. The woman is 94 years old. How many hours do you want her to stand there without some water?
And no bathroom break.
I'm not kidding. And, she was removed from the voter rolls illegally back in 2018 when Stacey Abrams ran. So what's happening, the only reason why Republicans are still in control in a state which is minority white and much more progressive, is that massive, we use the term vote suppression, it's vote thievery. What they did was, for example, right now, I am in federal court with I wrote a report for the ACLU saying that 198,355 people were illegally removed from the voter rolls, almost 200,000 people illegally removed from the voter rolls. And I did that report for the ACLU, and then we had a group of lawyers who have sued the Black Voters Matter. Latasha Brown has sued based on our information, so I've been helping them in federal court. So you have to understand, they cannot win, the Republicans. And again, I'm not a partisan guy. I'm just telling you who's doing this. They can't. So what they're doing is they're removing voters of color from the voter rolls. And they're especially aiming at, while they're aiming at black folk, of course, that's a huge group. And they still couldn't steal enough votes to save the Senate or the U.S. presidential election. But they're trying very hard. But they removed these voters illegally. And they're especially, and especially in light of this week, they're especially aiming at the Asian American voters. And let me explain how they're doing that. Because, and I did a story years ago. In fact, if you see my film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, there's a whole big story about the suppression of the Asian American vote in Georgia. And I released that film in 2016. Okay. So this is not a new issue to me. What happened was that there was a group called 10,000 Koreans Vote to get. Now, if you want 10,000 Koreans to vote, that is, you have to register 10,000 Korean Americans. So they had people who spoke Korean, older people, went out and registered Korean Americans. And they submitted several thousand registrations to the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp at the time. And Kemp, who is running for governor, okay, he's running for governor. And at the same time, he is in charge of the voting and in charge of the voter rolls. And he said, and so he never added those names to the voter rolls. So the Asian American organization called up and said, "Where's our voters?" And he said, "Oh, you don't have any voters. We haven't received anything from you." They said, "Well, yes, you have. We have photocopies." And he says, "You have photocopies of the registration?" "Yeah." So next thing they know, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Georgia has its own FBI, the GBI kicks in their door in Atlanta, the 10,000 Koreans Vote, takes their computers, takes their equipment, and threatens everyone with arrest. This is like the pizza thing, except they actually told these people, "You're under arrest. We are going to throw you in prison for photocopying voter registrations," which, of course, the state said didn't even exist. And wow. And they terrorized this group for 2 years. Wow. But here's the tragic thing. They shut down the group. They shut down the group not because in the end this ridiculous case fell apart, but this is the lengths that they will go to keep Asian Americans from voting. And it terrorized the Asian American community. A lot of the older people said, "Well, we're not," they threatened people who are in their 60s and 70s with arrest for registering to vote. And their only crime was voting while Asian American. So when you see things like this attack this week and the murders this week of Asian Americans in Georgia, it did not just come out of the blue. This is the result of the official actions and official tone set by the state of Georgia. These are not, despite what Mr. Biden said, these are not heroes. Just because so what happened is that the current Secretary of State picked by, who is just as bad, like I say, called the vote suppressor in chief by the NAACP. He's the guy that released the tape of being muscled by Trump. But that was so he could, as I just spoke to the ACLU, they said, well, that's so he could stay out of prison. It was him or someone's going to jail, and it's going to be him or it's going to be Trump. And he decided, well, Trump looks better in yellow and orange than I do.
Orange goes great with that.
Orange goes great with Trump. He should have no problem. So there you go.
Oh, wow. That is a fascinating story. And it's highly unfortunate. Are the groups sort of fighting back? There's another election coming up, as there always is in another year or so. Are they starting to come back together? And I know it's been only a few very short period of time since those shootings in Georgia, but have you seen any evidence of activism in the Asian community when it comes to voting, as opposed to other things might be active about?
Well, it all goes together. In fact, that one of the things is if they take away, as I've said, and actually I even said in that film when I was talking about the Asian American, when you look at low-income communities especially, they can't take away your jobs, they can't take away your life, cops can't shoot you, etc. if you control the vote. If the voters, if they take away your vote, then they can take away everything else. They can't unless they take away your vote. So it all goes together, and people understand that. So you do have organizations which are fighting, and right now, already in court, etc. The only solution, you can march about prejudice. You can't change people's attitude, but it's not really attitude that's at stake here. It's power. It's always power. It's always income. It's always follow the money, follow the jobs, and it's about power. And so the Asian American community has been, what's really wonderful is the great alliance now between the Black, Asian, Hispanic, and Jewish community. Remember, this is Georgia, and it was a big deal. Not only that Reverend Warnock, African-American minister who took Martin Luther King's place as head of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, but you have John Ossoff, who's Jewish, and you're talking about Georgia. It's like I could tell.
Italians are still.
I was going to
POC in Georgia. Yeah.
So prejudice and violence. We all know. You create an atmosphere of prejudice, and and to some people, it's authorization and a trigger for violence. It doesn't come from nowhere. If it did, we wouldn't have marches. We just have a couple psychiatrists looking out for people who've lost their marbles. That's not the issue. It is the issue of power and this massive alliance where you do have, for example, in the lawsuit Black Voters Matter, which filed the suit based on my investigation, has now allied with the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, which is a fancy term for SVREP, which is one of the biggest Hispanic organizations in the United States. You have a lot of activists joining together like never before to protect the vote, because people are understanding, as we saw in Georgia, and Stacey Abrams really led the fight here. And I worked with Stacey Abrams. Yes. In fact, actually, the current Secretary of State calls me a Stacey Abrams stooge. So I just want to warn you.
That's excellent.
And I just say, I said, can I get a button or something or a medal? Stacey Abrams. So okay. Guilty as charged. Stacey Abrams stooge. Because I'm exposing vote suppression. So people understand that it's ultimately about who. And you cannot say that Oriental Georgians are manipulating the vote and sneaking on and vote. They're literally accusing them, for example, also of voting twice, because they all have the Korean Americans, like they said, we have like 5 names, Park, Ho, Kim, it's we have don't have a lot of names. So we have a lot of common names. And what they're doing is they're also removing Asian American voters, you love this, for having common names. I spoke to Mr. Park. He lost his vote. You know how many Koreans are called Park? And so they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And you can't say Asian Americans are sneaking in a second vote and then not have someone say that they are the devil. They're the temptresses. These are the people we have to be afraid of. But again, that's why I work on many issues. I work for BBC and The Guardian all over the world. But it all comes back to me to voting. And voting in America, voting in Mexico, voting in Zambia. I've worked on these elections all over because it's the power. When the people have the power, it's amazing how prejudice tends to disappear.
Greg, you mentioned earlier that President Biden is, congratulated that Georgia Republican for saving democracy. Is there anything that Georgia's new Democratic senators or our Democratic administration could do on a national level to stop the voter suppression, not necessarily just in Georgia, but in some of the other 43 states where it's going on?
Absolutely, they are. Actually, Reverend Warnock gave his maiden speech in the Senate on vote suppression. He's made that issue number one. And Ossoff is joining him. It's great. They call each other brother. And people in Georgia, it's very emotional in Georgia, you have to understand. So the two of them have made vote suppression the number one issue. And of course, it's a pretty immediate issue for Warnock because, as you say, he was only filling the seat in a special election. So he has to run again next in 2022. Stacey Abrams is expected to run again for governor in 2022.
That'll be great. Maybe they'll actually they'll actually count that she won last.
I just want the votes to be counted. I mean, again, I never endorsed her candidacy. The important thing to me is that when she won, and I say she won in 2018, she ran against that Secretary of State, Brian Kemp. But as she said, I won, but I won't be inaugurated. And she cited my investigation, and particularly one case. I mentioned Christine Jordan, Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin. I was at the voting station. During the Stacey Abrams race for governor against Kemp. I was at the voting station when Mrs. Jordan went in to vote, and they said, "You can't vote here." And I looked her up. They said that she had moved, that she didn't live in Atlanta anymore. King's cousin. So then I went to her home, the one that they said that she had left. And there was King's picture on the wall right there in that house having dinner with her. And she'd been in that house at least a half a century, but they removed her. They said that she had moved, and they did this to 340,000 voters. And that is why Stacey Abrams, as she said, I won, but I wasn't inaugurated. And so and now they're losing their grip. They have control through gerrymandering, but they've lost the Senate seats. They lost the presidential vote in the state. And what's happening is that people are understanding that if they do everything they can to not only to go out and vote, but to check their registration, fight to get their names on the voter rolls, fight the power, they can win.
So true journalism does actually lead to justice, is what you're telling me.
I like to think so. I'm laughing because I think of the times I've been sued. It often leads to good journalism often leads to lawsuits. And actually,
I'd love to hear your thoughts about being a journalist who actually is nonpartisan. When in your reporting, you're just plain old reporting in this day of media that is pretty much only partisan or corporate.
Well, it's difficult because you have to, no one likes to, everyone wants you to be on their team.
Still willing to pay you. I mean, people have been fired who actually really just want to do journalism.
Yeah. I mean, and unfortunately, sometimes it comes from the left, not just the right or the Democrats. Do you know that so while I exposed the illegal removal of voters in Georgia, I also exposed the attempt by the the Wisconsin legislature to illegally remove 135,000 people. And
that's a Democratic legislature, or
no, Republican legislature. And so, by the way, the bipartisan Board of Elections adopted my position and refused to remove those voters, almost all of them students in Madison. So this is not just Georgia. Students in Madison, poor African Americans in Milwaukee. In other words, voters of color, the color being blue. Now, if they'd gotten away with that, Biden won Wisconsin by less than 20,000 votes. Therefore, if they had done that that purge as the Republicans wanted, Biden would have lost Wisconsin. It was, and now my job wasn't to get Biden elected, but that was the effect. But now here's the good one. So I just told you about how the Georgia Republicans were illegally removing voters. The Wisconsin Republicans were illegally removing voters. And then I went to Michigan, which is controlled by the Democrats, except for the legislature, which is Republican. And when I said that the voter rolls of Michigan were poisoned, that black voters in Detroit were being removed illegally, I expected a lot of screaming at me, oh, you're a Stacey Abrams stooge or whatever I am, Biden stooge,
different
whatever.
kind of you're Michael Moore stooge.
It was, believe it or not, it was the Democratic Secretary of State and Attorney General who had my website shut down. They said I was disparaging the Michigan voter apparatus. And the answer is I wasn't just disparaging. I was saying it's Jim Crow up there in Detroit. And then suddenly a few Democrats told him, he's talking about the Republicans removing Democrats. And then they say, oh yeah, open up this website. So this is like when you talk about the danger. And see, it disturbed me that Democrats would do that. Anyone would do this. But but again, unfortunately, suppression of news is very much a bipartisan game. I mean, you see this stuff with the unfortunately, what is my friends, people that like to think of themselves as my friends. That's why I don't make friends with politicians. They always break your heart. But the Progressive Caucus is sent letters to Facebook, Google, Twitter, saying take down sites we don't like. I don't like it. I'm going to tell you right now, I think shutting down Donald Trump's account when you tell the president of the United States he can't speak, that's a real danger to the First Amendment. And you may not like that. That doesn't mean I agree with what Trump said. That doesn't mean he may say crazy things. He may say even dangerous things. But I'm very worried about the status of the First Amendment. And believe me,
the First Amendment is about, I mean, Twitter is a private corporation, right?
No. Because not when as Glenn Greenwald has pointed out, as an attorney.
Yeah, we know.
He said it is very dangerous when you have government agencies and senators and Congress people saying, if you don't start censoring people, we will attack your business. We will shut you down. We will cost you billions. We will impose a censorship on you, etc. And the court, by the way, courts have ruled that when governments threaten media outlets to censor something, that is equivalent to government censorship. So they aren't, because Facebook, whatever you think of Zuckerberg, he said, please don't make me your censor in chief. Twitter, Jack Dorsey has said, I don't want to censor anyone. Use your own judgment. We don't ask the phone company to listen in and censor calls. And, I think we should disclose that we had a discussion before we went on air saying what words are going to trigger the robot, some freaking robot, to say, oh, take this down.
It is a problem that it's a robot, but what about the idea of yelling fire in a crowded theater? That is what Trump was basically doing. And these people were becoming murderous.
I'm for free speech. I like the First Amendment. It's my friend. If it weren't for the First Amendment, I'd be in prison. So no, I'm happy to take my chances. You didn't stop the Proud Boys by taking away Agent Orange's Twitter account. You may have
somewhere else.
Yeah, okay, look, the Twittiot in chief was, okay, He's playing with his orange thumbs. That wasn't the danger to our republic. That wasn't the danger to our republic. And remember, I did an investigation of the January 6th attack. That was serious stuff. I would like to know, when you talk about danger, forget Twitter accounts. Why did the Capitol Police and the FBI give the perpetrators of these felony crimes, not handing out pizza, these are real felony crimes, a cop had his head crushed in by a fire extinguisher, and they gave them a police escort to leave the crime scene. They gave the perpetrators of crimes, felons, a police escort to leave. Now, if it weren't these right-wing freaks, okay, if it weren't for these right-wing freaks, it would have been the FBI rules and basic police procedure require that you seal off a crime scene, especially a murder scene. People died. It's a murder scene. Why wasn't it sealed off? The other thing I have to say, Trump did commit crimes. That's why you should cuff him. And people, if you go to gregpalast.com, you'll see my story on a guy named Ali Alexander, who's one of the key people in fomenting this riot and how they do it. Okay, this is really important to understand, is that there was the rally at the Ellipse, if you remember, at the Ellipse in front of the Lincoln and Monument, where Trump ranted on. That's legal. That's fine. What was not legal was the march. The march was illegal, and no one seems to have picked that up except for Stacey Plaskett, who saw my story and Stacey Plaskett is the congresswoman who was an impeachment manager, who said it's important to understand that when Trump called for a march, the people who held the permit for that rally had already told the White House and told this group stop the steal, which led the march, which led to the riot. A march is illegal. It's not in our permit. We're not prepared. Remember, if you're going to have thousands of angry people, some of them armed, marching through the capital of the United States, you have to have police escort. You have to have barriers. You have to have monitors. You have to have insurance. You have to have people responsible. So they said, we can't do this. And also there's because of the COVID protection laws, they did not allow marches. You have to understand that through the Capitol. So all this was illegal. So when you have thousands of people marching illegal, that means that there's no control, there's no monitors, the cops aren't warned, the cops are specifically told there will be no march. The Capitol cops are told there will be no march. Trump was told there will be no march. And Trump broke the law. They haven't arrested him for that. Rather, they take away his Twitter account. You take away a guy who commits a crime that leads to murder. Now, understand, you commit a crime and it leads to someone dying. It's called murder. Now, even if you didn't know about it. And by the way, ask Donald Trump. He knows all about this because a couple weeks before he left office, his last execution that he pushed was of a kid who was 18 years old, who was driving a getaway car in a robbery. His Confederates, he didn't know, had killed 2 people. The kid is 18 years old. He's in a car. Now, yeah, he was with 2 guys who committed murder, but he didn't know anything about it. He had nothing to do with the murder. He just drove a getaway car. He didn't even know what happened. He was executed at Donald Trump's order. He was executed. Now, Trump did the same thing. He committed a crime. People died. I don't want to take away his Twitter account. I want to cuff him, read him his rights. Right, but that's the point. But now understand that if I try to report that story again, some robot may misunderstand it and think instead of reporting on the riot, I'm fomenting the riot. I'm applauding the riot, right? I'm applauding the riot.
You had this happen on YouTube. Is that right?
Yes, and I had this happen on YouTube where I ran. There's a program, Democracy Now, where I created a story on Georgia, and in the original, and I had opened it with people with Trump supporters saying the election's been stolen, the election's fraudulent. Well, because of the great pressure from the Progressive Caucus and Democrats, YouTube has a rule that you can't disparage elections. Now, the funny thing, the irony is, of course, I wasn't disparaging election. I was explaining why these people were idiots, why these people were wrong. But I let them rant and scream because they're allowed to rant.
Well, it's obvious when you watch them rant and scream how they're
we ran into the other problem. So that was taken down by Google's YouTube. And why? Because of the pressure from the Democratic Party. In addition, and it snaps back. You can't say, shut up that guy, muzzle that guy, censor that guy, but don't censor me. So while I could, I'd love to, and this was, you can go to Consortium News and see the story. You can't see the video, but you can see the story, read the story. But also, for example, in Georgia, Stacey Abrams and Reverend Warnock are facing investigation for the same thing, disparaging elections, because if we say you cannot say in public that the election was stolen, you can't say on YouTube, you can't say on Facebook, you can't say on Twitter that the election was stolen, then what happens when Stacey Abrams, and I'll give it to the Republicans, they said Stacey Abrams said the same exact thing, that the election was stolen from her in 2018. The difference, of course, is that she was correct, and Trump did not have the election stolen from him. He tried to steal the election. So Stacey Abrams is correct. The election was stolen. If we now have a rule that we're like China or we're like, Russia, where if God forbid you say the elections are stolen, they muzzle you, they stop you, and they may even charge you with a crime of election interference, which is what they're trying to do to Stacey Abrams, by the way. They're actually trying to put her in jail for saying that her election was stolen. They're calling that election interference by disparaging. But guess what? The Democrats in Michigan use the same phrasing to shut down my site. The Democrats. And again, they said, oops, we got the wrong guy. We got someone that's helping Democrats. At that moment, I wish I wasn't helping Democrats. Right. But
you're like, actually,
I'm just very, very concerned about saying speech, even hurtful, nasty speech, is illegal. Let's not forget one of my favorite cases is that the ACLU sued on behalf of the American Nazi Party for their right to march through a Jewish neighborhood in Skokie, Illinois. And then the ACLU joined the march against the Nazis, but they said marching, screaming, even if it's offensive, terrible, wrong, inaccurate, you answer a lie with the truth. And let me tell you, what happened in Washington, the attack on the Capitol, the murders that happened there, the murder of the cop, the mayhem, the crimes, that wasn't because of a tweet. It wasn't because of a tweet.
Well said. Greg Palast, investigative reporter, joining us here on the program on ACT.tv. Final thoughts on what people can do other than go to Greg Palast's website and read your incredible writing there. What can people do to ensure voter, suppression is top of mind for our elected officials?
Number one, do two things. One, get active. Black Voters Matter, SV, Rep, you'll see these organizations. Again, you can go to my site to get some of this information. And I also have a book out, How Trump Stole 2020. I couldn't possibly publish that book anymore. I have that book right there. Yeah, but I wrote it in advance because we got close. He was 43,000 votes from stealing the election. But so that has the information. If you go to How Trump Stole 2020, you can still get that book. And the other, I think, for next few minutes, maybe
I have one copy if you'd like.
Okay. You have to read. We'll have a session where we just read it out loud. Well, there is by the way, at my site, there's a free, you can download the audiobook for free. Now but what I want you to do is also do something really simple. Check your own registration and vote. Check the registration of everyone you know and make sure that they vote. Now, this is really simple. 17 million people every year get removed from the voter rolls. Most of those incorrectly. Don't assume you've been registered. I checked my registration. I was removed from the voter rolls of California. If all those people like Mrs. Jordan, now she'd been voting it was going to be her 50th year voting in 2018 for Stacey Abrams, her 50th year. She first won the vote and registered to vote the year her cousin was murdered in 68. Now, she had no reason to check her registration except for this. She lives in Georgia and she's Black. If you have to check your voter registration every year and then make sure you actually vote and make sure everyone you know vote. This is not small. I know we think, well, that's dumb. It doesn't change everything. It's not a miracle. But it changed, as you just saw from 2 senators being elected out of Georgia. You're going to get a check in your pocket, my friends, for $1,400 because John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock won those Senate races. I mean, hey, is that not enough of a reward? Wake up, fill out that
Not
ballot.
only that, all of your parents and friends are getting, vaccinated, and your children are going to be able to go back to school. There's a lot more to it than
staying alive is really pretty cool.
Yeah, staying alive.
I mean, I'm not again, it's not my job to praise politicians, but hey, thanks, Joe.
Right. Greg Palast, thank you so much. It's always a joy to have you on here. There's one more thing I want to say that I fear saying.
All right.
And I agree with everything you said about, the canceling of free speech, but I really am enjoying the silence.
Look, like I say, if the Twitty chief, I mean, you have to enjoy seeing his thumbs locked up. Reading his,
I'm willing to trade off that enjoyment so that we can have a robust democracy with a robust First Amendment that is, protective of people.
Yeah, well, but
but in the meantime,
but don't forget this. Don't forget this. I'm not sure. I think that Trump's, mad tweets, that's one of the things that defeated him. He defeated himself, not Joe Biden. Joe Biden was, kind of disappeared during the campaign and just let Trump tweet himself out of office. I mean, sometimes I understand freedom of speech works all kinds of ways. Imagine if Trump had been silenced during the year. Some of his, so his crazy 5 a.m. stuff. He may have been saved from himself if he had been shut down earlier. I'm very, very concerned. I think we have to be, look, there's always dangers when people say horrible, stupid, hurtful, biased, prejudiced things. It's terrible. But we have to answer lies and prejudice and ugly business with what you're doing right now. Tell the truth on them.
There is a secondary loss here, as you said, if he goes into the shadows, which he is. I know he just came out saying that if, he appeared somewhere saying if the filibuster goes through, the Republicans are shot forever. There is a danger that if these things go underground, people will go back to their regularly scheduled lives of non-resistance.
Look, when I did the story on January 6th, also, we saw that, these guys we now know that have been arrested had walkie-talkies. They weren't communicating through Facebook. It was walkie-talkies. It was planned meetings. It was phone meetings. And I don't want to start asking the phone company to monitor and censor calls. So, it will be there. One thing we have learned in history, it's really, really hard to muzzle people, good people or bad people, and that's communication is not the issue. It's the violence itself, which is the issue, and the violent attitudes. And you're not going to change violent attitudes by silencing publications. You are going to change attitudes the hard way, which is that you got to go person to person, community to community, make the difference. And of course, if you've got the power, you create the protection.
Greg Palast, again, thank you for your work in saving democracy, even though it was just a secondary outcome to doing true journalism. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Anyway. Greg Palast, reporter for the BBC, The Guardian, Rolling Stone, bestsellers, including The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. And your newest book, How Trump Stole 2020, was released last July. So very prescient. He tried. He almost won. He almost did. Trump
almost stole it.
And your giant major reports on the voter purges in Georgia and Wisconsin are continuing to keep justice flowing here in the U.S. So I thank you again for that, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
You're the best. Bye.
You're watching ACT.tv. I'm Julianna Forlano. Keep watching. We'll keep bringing you these great folks that are fighting for justice. See you next time.